The excitement continues with the Brothers Mahoney. As always, I am Michael,
And I am James.
and today we are discussing Whispers of Terror.
Whispers of Terror is the third story in the Big Finish main range of Doctor Who releases. It was released in November 1999, which is just a while ago. The story is written by Justin Richards, which is not a name I'm particularly familiar with, but it's a name to look out for in the future as I quite enjoyed the story. This story happens to feature the Sixth Doctor, who we got to enjoy in the Sands of Time for a bit, along with Peri, with the first outing of Nicola Bryant with Big Finish, and I thought it was a marvelous first outing for her. And the story clocks in about an hour and 33 minutes or so.
Yeah, and taken straight from the Big Finish side, the plot is as followed. The Doctor and Peri find themselves in the Museum of All Antiquities, where every sound is told for posterity, from the speeches of Vistine Crane to security service wiretaps and interrogation tapes. They also find an intruder, mysteriously changed recordings, and a dead body. Before long, the Doctor realizes that there is more going on than a simple break-in or murder. How can he defeat a creature that is made of pure sound? So this story is very well suited for an audio format.
I quite agree. Because this takes place in a museum of sounds, as a museum of speeches and the like, it just fits a lot easier with a audio drama than it ever really could with an episode of Classic Who, or really New Who. It fits the idea of an audio drama, and it just uses it to full effect, really, because the creature we get to enjoy in this episode is made out of pure sound. It travels along wavelengths, and it can replicate voices and the like, which just works really well with this type of Big Finish story.
Yeah, and I think also really adding to the strength of this one, I mean, it's a pretty tense story anyway, with some political intrigue thrown in. A lot of the voice performances here are really good, and I just wanted to mention a couple of them, being Vistine Crane, who is voiced by a Matthew Branher. There's a character named Gantman, who is voiced by a Peter Myers, and then perhaps one of the more stellar performances, Beth Ponal, was a character voiced by Lisa Bowerman. And I think all of these, along of course with Colin Baker and Nicola Bryant, bring a lot of strength into the story.
And it brings a lot of snark into the story. The Sixth Doctor Peri team up was always a bit controversial with some fans. It seemed to some people a bit abusive just because of how domineering the Sixth Doctor was.
And to be fair, one of the first things the Sixth Doctor ever does is try to strangle Peri, so...
I believe she actually tries to strangle her twice. But I mean, that's all it happens. It's fine. I've always liked the Sixth Doctor. I don't even hate the Trindalama. I would pick the Trindalama over most anything in the Chibnall era, honestly, when it comes to terms of writing. I'm not joking either. I don't joke about that. Yeah, but I actually really liked the Sixth Doctor and Peri from the show anyway. And it's really just, it's so good in this episode. And any Sixth Doctor Peri thing in the future, I'm really going to look forward to. Because they've always had a great dynamic anyway, in my opinion. I think they work well off each other. And
yeah, and this is a good example of it too. The very first scene of the first episode just features the Doctor arguing with Peri, and it sounds like it's straight, like the type of argument they would have in the show.
Yeah, basically, without quoting it verbatim, Peri wants to know, where the TARDIS landed. Well, firstly, the way she asks this, she wants to know where we are. And the Doctor replies, "Oh, I know where we are. We're in the TARDIS." Because, of course, to the Doctor, Peri's question wasn't clear enough. And so it just goes back and forth like that. The Doctor insinuates that Peri's being a bit dim, which Peri doesn't take kindly to. But it's just this great back and forth between them because Peri does not, take veiled or not so veiled insults quietly. She always snorks right back at the Doctor. And it's just a very fun dynamic between the two.
And it also leads to a pretty nice piece of dialogue in episode 2, in which the voice creature is sort of imitating the Doctor to the creature's own benefit, and sort of cows Peri saying, "Hey, I was wrong," which leads Peri to think to herself, well, that would be a first. And then the character that Peri's with is like, what? You mean he's never wrong? And Peri's amusing reply is, he never admits it.
Yeah, this
Exactly.
doctor really never would admit being wrong, because I don't think he ever does. But that's the best part about him. Well, that and the glorious coat he wears. That might actually be the best part about him.
And even though this is an audio release, it does mention the fact that the Doctor's wearing a somewhat hideous, colorful coat, and it's always fun to hear that referenced in story.
Yeah, even though I quite like it, I think it's fashionable. I wouldn't mind one. I wonder if they ever try to not patent that, but try to sell it. I'm sure there are people like they try to do something with the fourth Doctor's scarf. I wonder if they ever try to do anything with that multi color monstrosity.
I'm not sure if at that point in the history of Doctor Who if sales should be that great.
No, sadly that's probably true. I guess I'd have to just make one, but I can't so I guess that's not going to work. Anyway, back to Whispers of Terror, which, by the way, is a great name for an audio story.
One element of this story that I really enjoyed was the whole plot around Vistine Crane, who is a character that died before this story started. He's a very well-known actor who was about to announce a run for presidency, and then he dies in mysterious circumstances. And a lot of this revolves around the reason behind his death, and the individual of Bath Ponal, who was going to be his VP, and the fact
and who was his agent? He was an actor, as Michael said.
Yeah, who started out as his agent and who was planning to be his VP. So there's a lot of political intrigue thrown in here, and I think it comes out most strongly in the last couple of episodes. But James and I are both quite into politics, so that's always an element of Doctor Who, be it classic Who or really any form of Doctor Who, that we've always enjoyed, and I think it works really well here.
Yeah, the political angle was really more politics light than most things. It's not like a classic Who story where there's multiple factions and, one side of the Doctor and companions are with one side and one person's with the other side, and we're seeing both sides from different perspectives. But more just, it's kind of a background thing. It's done in a way that you can't believe enough, but it is rather light. For example, Vistine Crane was going to announce a run for presidency just 1 month before the election, which I guess I don't know what laws they have and what type of ballots they have for the I don't know. I didn't say if it was a galaxy election. I suppose it's probably just a planet. Maybe it was even just a country. It never really did specify, which is again part of why you call it politics light. Two of the characters at the beginning are discussing that since Vistine Crane died, there's no real credible candidates to vote for. This is a presidential election, and he didn't even announce there has to be a credible candidate. I mean, credible enough anyway, no matter what type of party system they're under. See, that's I call it politics light for that reason. You see, yes, the political angle is there, but because I'm more deep into politics than maybe an average person, immediately that's what my mind goes to. The background for the political stuff does not have a very strong basis to me, but what we see in the last couple of episodes works fine on its own.
Yeah, especially once we find out. I mean, you could argue there's actually a couple of antagonists in this story. One, of course, being the sound creature, or I guess the creature made of pure sound, as the Big Finish plot alludes to. But there's another antagonist thrown in here also, and the reasons they have for doing what they're doing sort of comes out in a sort of typical big speech by the villain at the end. And I don't know, I think it's maybe a little bit predictable, but I also think it came out decently well, and I think it was fun. Another thing I rather liked about this story, and one of the reasons that among the 3 Big Finish audio drama we've listened to, this is my favorite so far, is that they threw in sort of a plot twist about one of the characters that I didn't see coming until really at all. It sort of came up.
It's the plot twist.
But some plot twists you can see being set up at the beginning, and I just never caught on to them setting this up, even though if you listen carefully, you can tell they're setting something up, and I just didn't see it coming. And I was pretty impressed with it, and it's the type of twist that would never work what we were alluding to earlier, it never would have worked on an actual episode of Classic Who. It can really only work in audio form.
Yeah, you see twists like this. I enjoy psychological thrillers and the like, and you see twists like this that just wouldn't work in a TV or in a movie, where we see a character. Well, because books can use thoughts and inner dialogue of a character without ever revealing who the character is, and you can't do that in movies in any real degree. And so, much like how certain plot twists can work well in book mediums that would never work on TV, there are going to be plot twists. And we saw bits of this, like in The Sands of Time. And I suppose there's kind of a twist in Phantasmagoria, although that one wouldn't have been predictable anyway. I don't think you could really predict it. But yeah, it's interesting to see what types of twists they'll come up with in a completely different medium than TV and the like.
Yeah, I certainly think that this is going to stand out, and it does make me quite eager to see what we have coming up in the future, given, again, that we've only listened to 3 of these so far.
Yeah, especially, again, with the Sixth Doctor and Peri, because it is a great relationship. And just to quickly place the story, I always like to do this. This one's really rather simple. It takes place in between Revelation of the Daleks, which is the last episode of season 22, which is only the first whole Colin Baker season, and The Mysterious Planet, which was the first part of The Trial of a Time Lord, which is season 23. This really is more in line with the Baker-Peri dynamic in The Mysterious Planet than it was really throughout any of season 23, because it was a bit more abrasive in that season, and it did mellow out a bit. And this feels like a more mellowed out version, and I'm assuming that's kind of what they're going to go for in any Baker-Peri ones coming up, just because for a lot of people it just didn't play well, like what we were saying before. So as long as they can still be snappy with each other, I think it's going to be just a lot of fun.
And actually picking up on that point, that's another one of the reasons I like this more than the previous story, which was Phantasmagoria. There was a Fifth Doctor story with Torlo. Now, I think Torlo is a pretty interesting companion, and I would argue that Torlo might be a more interesting companion than Peri. But the dynamic between Torlo and the Fifth Doctor is nowhere near as fun or entertaining as the dynamic between Peri and the Sixth Doctor.
Well, in some ways, I mean, they did have a very good first scene, and for the first episode of Phantasmagoria, it was a fine dynamic, but the problem was, as happens sometimes in Classic Who, they get separated, and they were separated for at least 2 whole episodes. So,
Yeah, but
even if they had a great dynamic, which it's an okay one, it would have Phantasmagoria out much anyway, even though, again, we both like Phantasmagoria.
Yeah, and even if they had it separated, I just get the sense if they had been together for as long as the Sixth Doctor and Peri were in this story, they still would have half the personality that we get from Colin Baker and Nicola Bryant here. It's just a really hard combination to beat in forms of entertainment, and I just, as much as I enjoy Torlo as a companion, I just don't think they could ever match that.
This is true. I do know there's at least one Fifth Doctor Torlo story coming up at some point called Lu Guru, which is also, again, just the Fifth Doctor and Torlo. And that's going to be fun for a lot of reasons, because there's werewolves, apparently. But yeah, so I guess we can try to see if they stick together a bit in that one and see how that dynamic works there. But I agree, basically, no matter what, the dynamic is not going to be as good as what we get with the Sixth Doctor and Peri.
And I guess just to clarify, that's not necessarily a dig on Peter Davison. We did mention previously that Peter Davison was never really our favorite Doctor when it comes to Classic Who. And we have a couple of reasons for that. He just seems so lukewarm a lot of the times, and he doesn't have quite the bombastic personality as a lot of the other Classic Who Doctors. But it's really hard to beat what Colin Baker brings with his arrogant attitude. I mean, yeah, sometimes it can be unbearable, and sometimes Peri can't help but roll her eyes. And in fact, in this story, she sighs a couple of times after he's done talking, because of course she does, and who can blame her? But
yeah, and you can almost hear the eye rolls from Peri. You know exactly when they're happening. There's at least one point where they're just having a conversation. It's kind of important trying to figure something out. And so Peri says he doesn't know who's doing it. And then, for no real reason, the Sixth Doctor says, whom you mean? And then later on in the conversation, Peri says, well, whom Avo is doing it. And the doctor says, no, that would be who Avo.
Yeah, sometimes the Sixth Doctor is a dick just to be a dick, and I love it.
He was always a bit of a there's a term for it. Being so concerned about how language is used. Very strict about that. I know that actually came up, and I believe Attack of the Cybermen, I believe it came up in a lot.
Yeah, so it's a really fun dynamic, and I think the what really helps is the main story is, I think, also pretty entertaining and sometimes tense too. So you have a really good Doctor, a pretty good companion mixed with a good story, and I think a lot of this works. Whispers of Terror, in my opinion, is an extraordinarily strong story, and if you want to try to get into listen to Big Finish audio, I would say Whispers of Terror, which is only under $4 on BigFinish.com. I would say this would be a pretty good starting point.
Yes, I agree. And also, I know it's a common belief among people that the Sixth Doctor's era, well, he's the Sixth Doctor just isn't like this well as other Doctors because of the arrogance, because they saw him as being undoctorly in a lot of ways. And one, Michael and I just get finished watching An Unearthly Child, and honestly, this Doctor is very similar to how we first see the Doctor in An Unearthly Child. But a lot of people do contend that the Big Finish audio dramas really do the service to Colin Baker's Doctor that he never got in the show. Because we might like Colin Baker's Doctor, but a lot of the scripts were generally weaker. I mean, on the whole, I still like the era enough, but they did have weaker scripts. But a Big Finish does a lot to recuperate his image for a lot of people. And this is a very good first, well, I guess he appeared in The Sands of Time, but as a solo outing, this is a very good first solo outing for Colin Baker. It's quite an enjoyable story, and I really do like sound creatures, especially in audio dramas where they can work very well.
Yeah, it's a good concept, and it worked.
So after this enjoyable story, Michael, what do we have coming up next for our conversations?
Yeah, so next up, we are jumping back into New Who with the third episode of the revival, Series 1 being The Unquiet Dad, which I think is maybe one of the more forgotten ones of Series 1, so I think it should be interesting to get into and discuss.
That will be fun indeed.
As always, this has been the Brothers Mahoney. I am Michael.
And I am James.
And you have a pleasant night and a day.